Hello, my name is Loretta Scott, and I'm president of Rochester City Council. I'd like to welcome you to this edition of Inside City Council. This is a show that we've designed to help inform and enlighten our viewers about how City Council works. It's my pleasure to introduce a longtime friend and colleague, Carolee Conklin. Welcome. We're so glad for you to be here today. Carolee, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's see. I've lived in Rochester most of my life. I lived for 40 years in Maplewood before I moved downtown 10 years ago. I ran for City Council in 2005 after I had retired from full-time government. I previously was employed as a deputy city treasurer, the deputy county clerk, and then the city clerk. So, and long before any of that, you and I were colleagues working in federal anti-poverty programs.
Yes, ma'am, for sure. And your background tells the story. You know, I call you Eagle Eye Conklin on council sometimes because you.
Sometimes I'm called other things too.
But your strength is clear. I mean, your ability to keep us on point with our fiscal arrangements and the way that we operate government, your value to us is clear. Can you tell me, this is your third term?
My third term, and I think the main strength I brought to council is a combined knowledge of government and government financial accounting, along with an understanding of government and what you can and what you can't do.
Mm. So of those years that you've spent on council, what are you most proud of?
I think one of the things I'm proudest of is changing the way the council reviews the city's budget submission. What used to be a month, we both remember a month of hearings that sort of dragged on, and many times just became space fillers. We now have 2 full days of hearings. Before departments come to council, they have submitted an overall plan to council. They've answered some outstanding questions, and they've made the lengthy opening statements that are no longer a part of the hearing.
And we do appreciate that. Now, your finance chair, what does that mean?
The finance chair, the finance committee has mainly two serious responsibilities. The one is the review of the annual budget submission from the mayor and the administration. And the other is sort of the clearinghouse for all finance and administration legislation that comes before the council. So those are the 2 major responsibilities.
So the overall fiscal policy was in your wheelhouse as well, right? As far as guiding your colleagues on council and looking at the kinds of things that we need to attend to. Can you say a little about that?
Well, I think, and this council under your leadership has developed 6 council priorities, and one of what I feel the most important one is working on establishing financial stability, fiscal stability for the city of Rochester. We, like most Rust Belt cities, our tax base was founded on manufacturing, which was a mainstay for Rochester for well over 100 years. That's not the case anymore. We also have 40% of our city is tax exempt, meaning that the cost of fire, police, public safety, they use many of those services, but they're not paying for them, and with their not-for-profit status. So I think to establish some long-term financial stability, we have to look at the state for a couple of things. One, obviously, is achieving parity with the other cities in New York State with state aid. And I think the other one we need to really begin seriously looking at the state for is some relief with our public services. 50 years ago, the state stepped up to the plate with education, and they now basically fund more in the schools than the city does. But I think they also begin to start picking up our burden, our financial burden on public safety services.
So you think that is the best opportunity we have for alleviating the fiscal situation that we continually finding ourselves in?
I think that's realistically one we should be exploring. You know, the suburban districts have the ability to have fire districts that raise their own taxes and tax the services for fire safety. You know, I think our city fire department is probably one of the most efficient in the nation. I don't think any house is more than 2 minutes away from a fire truck when they need one. I think we have to look at some more equitable funding for our police services, our fire services.
Where do you think there are opportunities for us in terms of reducing expense or shrinking government? Or
you know, it's a wonderful little buzzword for folks to use, but I mean, this government over the past dozen years has pared down its workforce to the bare minimum. I think we're at the point now where there's no more layoffs to meet goals. It's either we're going to eliminate this service, we're going to do away with recreation centers, we're going to do away with certain things. That's real. Our libraries. That's really. I mean, we get to the core of you have to answer a fire call, you have to answer a 911 call. Those you have, and you have to pick up trash.
So we're going to be extra smart on how we get more money to do what we do well.
That's the only solution I see.
I thank you so very much, but we are going to have a very short break. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Here we are on East Avenue in front of my favorite place, the Little Theater, which represents to me the diversity, the culture, the beauty, and the commerce of our city. I love the East District, and I'm so proud to represent it.
Welcome back to this edition of Inside City Council. I'm here with my guest today and my colleague, Carolee Conklin, Finance Chair for Rochester City Council. Carolee, before break, we were talking about opportunities for reducing costs, and we realized that there aren't many of those. But we can spend the money that we have efficiently. So, you know, in May we get the budget, and that's when you start looking at whether or not the expenditures make sense. So tell us about that whole process.
Well, it's a very in-depth look, department by department, bureau by bureau. The City Council, the Finance Committee, and the council staff review looking at prior years, looking at goals, looking at how cost-effective we feel there are. It's a chance for council to question in depth the departments as to their budget. And it's not only the dollars, but how those dollars are going to be allocated out to citizens. It's delivery of services that we look at very closely. There's very little, I mean, the council does not have line item veto. We can take X dollars away, or we can add X dollars, but we don't have a line item veto. We basically massage the budget the administration proposes. Over the years, we've added in some programs. One year there was a library cut that we restored the funding for the library. 2 years ago, we restored the funding for the mounted police with the understanding that it would be the last year of funding and that they would look for some alternative ways of funding the mounted patrol. So I think it's basically a fiscal oversight, a fiscal overview, and making recommendations for funding priorities.
As you lead that review process, What are the most significant items that you look for within the submission?
Well, I think it varies according to the mission of the office. You know, each bureau and department has a specific mission. What I'm looking at is how do they plan on fulfilling that mission? What's the most cost-effective way to do it? And I think it really changes with the department and the different things that they plan on doing. I mean, obviously, public safety has a specific goal. Recreation and youth services, I think, needs to, one of the things we're looking at there is how can you partner with other sources in the community? How do you work with a school district for library and recreation programs? Our central library has done a wonderful job of partnering with youth services and employment services and opening up their space. I think our libraries in many ways have become true community centers, and they've got a leader there that has not only vision but practical know-how. So I think we look differently at different departments.
Can the public weigh in on that? Can the public send in
Well, not only can they, but they do.
So how do they get their questions in?
Okay, well, we take questions on the air. These hearings are also televised, which is new to this particular council. And we televise our hearings to put up a number on the screen where folks can call in questions. Our staff is writing them down and handing to us as we meet. Although the budget hearings are technically meeting of the finance committee, all council members are pretty faithful about spending 2 days, fastened into their seats.
You know, that I'm very proud of the way our council operates and their diligence and commitment to that review process under your leadership. And I certainly commend you for that, because it's tedious, but it is essential, and it's at the heart of what we do as a council. So given your review of the budget and as you look at it, and knowing that we are balancing revenues with expenses, but we're in a tight situation. So what is your biggest concern facing us going forward?
Oh, I think the strengthening of our tax base and alleviating some of the burdens on city taxpayers. We talk about the average homeowner whose house is assessed at $70,000, but increasingly we're becoming a city of renters along with homeowners. Some of our neighborhoods have over 50% renters as opposed to home ownership. Those people are paying taxes too, one way or the other.
Yes.
One way or the other. And although I sort of get rankled when people tell me, I'm paying your salary. I'm sure over the years you've heard that more than once.
Many times.
But the fact of the matter is they are paying our salaries, and there's certain responsibilities and services we owe those folks.
Our long-term outlook as a city, how would you rate that?
I think this city has been a beneficiary of 40 years of solid fiscal management. Tom Ryan, Bill Johnson, Bob Duffy, Tom Richards, and now Lovely Warren have all maintained fiscal responsibility. We have an extremely high bond rating, one of the highest in New York State, that I think we should all be very proud of. We live in a county that has the credit rating of basically junk bond status. Much of it is due to dipping into their reserves. We are one of the very few cities in the Northeast that has a tax relief fund. We have judiciously put money aside to save money. We have been very circumspect about selling off our assets, and it's reflected in our bond rating.
Well, I am just so proud of the way that we've operated and maintained our outstanding bond rating. I don't know if people realize that saves us a lot of money and
It
enables
certainly
us
does.
to do quite a bit.
It certainly
So
does.
we're going to talk more about additional opportunities. We're going to take another short break, and we'll be right back.
My favorite place in Rochester is the Rochester Public Market, located at 280 North Union. Why is this my favorite place? Real simple. The shopping is wonderful. Come on down. We got a lot of good stuff for you.
Welcome back to this edition of Inside City Council. My name is Loretta Scott. I'm City Council President, and I am here with my friend and colleague, Carolee Conklin. Before the break, we were talking about the concerns facing the city going forward. And we spent a little time on that. I want to go a little further with that. What is one of the most impactful situations that cause us concern with our financial situation?
Well, I would have to put unfunded state mandates on the top of my list, right up there along with more equitable funding of public safety. Facing along with the counties and the other municipalities in New York State, have unfunded state mandates. The state passes, the legislature in its infinite wisdom passes legislation that we then have to implement. You know, an example I like to use is 3 or 4 years ago, the legislature passed a violence in the workplace legislation. Sounds worthwhile. I think we're all opposed to violence anywhere. But what this is translated to is part of the act is that every municipality has to have workshops dealing with violence in the workplace. The conservative cost to the City of Rochester is $200,000 a year to fund this staffing and training. That is just one small example of an unfunded state mandate that gets passed down to the citizens of Rochester, New York. And you keep layering on one unfunded state mandate after another until they eat up a huge portion of our. Now, many of them are worthwhile. As I say, the violence in the workplace is a perfect example of a worthwhile program. But the legislature doesn't bother putting any funding in for those. We have what's called binding arbitration. The problem with binding arbitration, which is for the uniforms, is rulings are never based on the municipal's ability to pay.
Yes.
It's, and so, it's like that old "you must pay the rent." And so we need to have some parity in arbitration that has to the arbitrators have got to look at the ability of municipalities to pay.
Well, that's a steep hill, but it's not one we're going to give up on. We're going to keep climbing and banging on the state government to be more mindful of that and stop passing down the mandates that we have to subsequently tax our local citizens to pay for. As we've worked through those kinds of issues, though, I mean, finance is critical to us, but the body upon which we're sitting on right now, our council, is very unique in a number of ways. Tell me what
I
you
think
feel
we've
about
got
that.
a wonderful city council. It is representative. I mean, the first and foremost, it's a girls' rule. I mean, we have 5 women on the council, and the guys try very hard to toe the line. But beyond the fact that there's majority women there, we work in a building that's a magnificent historical building. You walk around the 3rd floor, and we have the most extensive collection of mayoral portraits in the whole country.
Yes.
But the one thing they have in common is every single one of them
Is a white male.
Is a white male. We have a council that has not, that has, as I say, 5 women. We have, you've got a picture of our, I mean, we represent the face of Rochester. We represent age. We represent people of color. We represent Hispanics. It's a marvelous group of people who have learned to work well with each other. It's so like a family. We occasionally have minor disagreements. Under your leadership, we've really gelled and worked together in a friendly and nice way. So, and I think much of that is due to your leadership on council.
Well, I appreciate that, although I am just totally honored to work with a group of dynamic, first of all, outstanding women, we've got to say that, but dynamic professionals overall. The work that we've done together as a council is, I think it's just amazing that we can work so effectively in getting the people's work done with so little strife. That's not always been the way. That's not always been the case.
No, it's not. We both remember when they...
But I think the work that we do kind of speaks for itself, and there are efforts that we've done and will continue to work on, like the council priority areas. We're going to work more in trying to get more attention paid to that. And I think we need to think in terms of aspiration funding, which means that you put your money where your goals and your desires are. So as we look at the whole budget review process and say, all right, if we want jobs and economic development, how much of this budget is going into that? And we look at each of those priority areas and see how we can make that happen. I believe that our members, and certainly you with your leadership on the Finance Committee, will help us be able to do that.
Well, and I think our council brings a set of really creative backgrounds. I mean, we have attorneys, we have neighborhood activists. It's varied. We have people like you and I with the actual government experience. And I should mention that prior to being on council, you headed up the city's largest department.
Largest non-uniform department.
No, that's correct. All right. And that provided recreation and parks and employment. So I think there's a wealth of experience on this council.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and this has been, I hope, enlightening and informative for our viewers. We need to think about doing a little class in budget and finance 101.
Maybe we can get somebody to teach it.
That would be you, Madam Conklin.
Thank you, President Scott.
Thank you for being here. This has been Inside City Council. Thank you so much for joining us.